Welcome back to another edition of the Balas and Skene Show. Same version, different edition with Michigan's five-time Big Ten champion, former All-Big Ten offensive lineman, former NFL offensive lineman. A lot of people don't know that. Skene, you played 4 years in the NFL, 1 year away from like a $1 billion pension or something
Yeah,
like
that's what they pay. Yeah,
that. But decided to keep his wits about him and all his faculties, and it's to our benefit. So, Skene, thanks for being with us. We're here to talk about Michigan's 63-3 win over Central Michigan. Absolute blowout, exactly what you would expect against a bad football team. And Central is a bad football team. They've got some work to do under Coach Matt Drinkhall. I am not going to minimize this, though, and say, okay, well, it's just Central Michigan. I kind of did when people were saying we're completely back. We're totally back, Michigan fan base. We won't know anything until after the Nebraska game scheme. But they did what they were supposed to do. They had a shakeup on the offensive line due to injuries, a couple new guards in there. We will talk about that in a minute. But your overall impressions, to me, this is exactly what they should have done. And it's encouraging because 63-3 is 63-3.
Hey, Balas, I think the last time Michigan won 63-3 in the Big House, it was in the early 90s against the run and gun or the run and shoot Houston team. I think that was the infamous game where I got flagged for being on the sideline practicing my golf swing on national television.
Is this true?
I did not get flagged. I didn't get flagged. I got caught. True
Okay.
story. It's a true story. The game was 63-3 in the fourth quarter. The starting offensive line had been put on the sideline. The backup guys were playing. And during a few moments late in the game when there was nothing going on, Mark Melia, who's now Dr. Mark Melia,
Sure is.
and I were talking about golf. We liked to both play golf at the time. And I'm standing on the sideline, and I'm practicing a golf swing on the sideline with Melia with all my equipment except my helmet on. So I just do a little backswing, and I just do this on the sideline. And then, Melia and I's little conversation was over with. And then about 3 minutes later, our sports information football operations guy, Jeff Long, comes up to me, and Jeff's like, "Hey, nice golf swing." And Jeff wasn't standing next to me when I did that. I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Yeah, Vern Lundquist and Dick Vermeil are not Vern Lundquist, Brent Musburger and Dick Vermeil are up there breaking down your golf swing with a telestrator and everything right now up on television because it was 63-3. There was nothing for them to talk about."
Yeah.
So,
did you get called into Mo's office afterwards and say, "Hey, we take this seriously"?
I did not get called into the office, but in that same game, we had one of the guys, I can't remember if it was a D-back or one of our wide receivers. I don't remember. It's been a few years. Had scored a touchdown, and at that time did a little bit of a more flamboyant celebration in the end zone afterwards. Excessive dancing and big celebrations were not allowed at that time in Michigan football. You gave the ball to the referee, you turned around, you celebrated with the other 10 guys, you went to the next play. That was the rule. So in the following meeting, the first team meeting, I thought, I'm definitely in trouble about this. And Coach Moeller comes in and mentioned, a couple things, good game, etc. But it was early in the season, so it wasn't going to be too good. So basically, Moeller says, we got guys dancing in the end zone after they're scoring touchdowns instead of celebrating with their teammates like Michigan's supposed to do. And then I hear we got some jackass practicing his golf swing on the sideline instead of helping his teammates get better out there. I just kind of sat down in my chair like this. I
love it. That's great. And that's when the fetish began. The golf fetish began. And look at you now, shooting 73 at Agaming. So that's fantastic. I don't think I've ever heard that story, which is
that's
hilarious.
true. It's a true story. And somewhere in the bowels of this house I'm sitting here, I have an old videotape with the proof of it.
Good luck getting that to work after the moths ate through it. I'm sure there's a copy out there that'll work for you. So,
it's right here. There's a copy here.
I'm going to find it, and we're going to play it on this show here in a couple of weeks, as a matter of fact. So I was watching the Desmond catch the other night from Notre Dame again, and there's Doug Skene right there celebrating with his teammates, getting his TV time. Who was the one that lifted him, though? Do we know?
It might have been Rob Doherty. He's either Rob Doherty
Okay. What an iconic moment in Michigan history, and you got to be part of that. It's amazing going back and looking, and how amazing how many memories there have been since then. We're getting older. So, but
well, anyway, so 63-3. Back to Michigan demolishing an undermanned Central Michigan front. So offensively, Balas in the game. I like to, as I like to do, is when the game starts and you read all the pre-game stuff, yada yada. You always look for where does the defense look front wise, physically? Who's the guy, right? Who's the one or two players in that defensive front that's going to cause us a challenge and cause us a problem as the game goes on? And with all due respect to Central Michigan, they didn't have one.
Nope.
So I thought, okay, Michigan is as I thought we would be. We're at a different level of talent here versus Central, and it just kind of is what it is. So we shouldn't have much problems moving the football, and we didn't. The one thing that stood out to me most offensively is what the game plan was. And it was clear there was a massive difference in the approach offensively. We were going to far more zone blocking, inside zone, outside zone. And what I mean by that is the angles at which the offensive lineman is taking. When you're doing inside zone, it's more of a upfield first step. When you're doing outside zone, it's almost a lateral first step toward the sideline, but you keep your shoulders square and you're blocking the first thing that shows, whatever it is, the first color that shows in your assigned zone. Lots of that as Bryce is rolling out right, rolling out left, and running backs doing the same thing. That was a departure from week 1 and week 2, which was against New Mexico. And the attempt against Oklahoma was far more of the 46-47G power football, pulling a guard around, bringing Bredesen up front side, kicking a defensive end. We saw a little bit of that. I think in the first half, we only tried 46-47 power a couple times. And by the way, it didn't do real well in the first half when we tried it. But the other stuff worked really well, as we saw. So the exciting part is, wow, this is what a Bryce Underwood offense looks like. And the better we get at this will change the dynamic and the way teams will attack us.
He's their best player, in my opinion. I don't think there's a question about it. Justice Haynes might have an argument. Michigan's running back, who I said, by the way, as he chokes on his oatmeal here.
Yeah, I'm fighting off a cold here, Balas.
That's okay. I just appreciate you being here and letting me make fun of you. So, but Justice Haynes might have an argument. And I wrote in the post game, he might be the Michigan's best home run threat at running back since Tyrone Wheatley. There have been a lot of backs since then, but in terms of the vision and then being able to take off and get to top end speed, this kid's got some wheels, man.
Yes, he does. And it's evident when he gets to the edge. The other thing I like about him a lot is when he gets to the edge, because a lot of guys can get to the edge, right? It's a straight sprint to the sideline. But when he turns, it's that two-step turn. He doesn't lose his top-end speed.
Yep.
And he's got a really nice knack of getting over there and getting upfield and making some cuts without losing his top-end RPMs, which he's running that up there. So that's a difference. Not every back has that.
Yeah, and guys think they have an angle on you. They don't. And he's outrunning people to the edge, safeties, even corners at times. So fun to watch. But back to Bryce Underwood, this is really his show. And Biff Poggi, it was interesting after the game. And we're going to go back to your point here again in a minute about Bredesen and not telegraphing the offense. But he did say, okay, we made the mistake in the Oklahoma game of thinking we're going to shorten time of possession. We're going to bully them a little bit, possess the ball, and stay in this game. He said, never again, not with a guy like this, not with a special talent like this. You could see why, because this guy, when it's on the unscheduled plays, and that's another thing that Drinkall said, Central Michigan's coach, he said that's what makes it so dangerous. When a guy gets out of the pocket or you move a guy around, and now you're trying to figure out, am I coming up to tackle this guy? This guy's got his eyes downfield. If I leave my assignment, is he going to throw it to my spot? That is something that we saw Michigan defenses struggle with for so many years, going back to Donovan McNabb, going back to the Oregon quarterbacks and guys like that. And now you've got a guy like that in Bryce Underwood that if you turn him loose, and it sounds like they're going to now, completely changes the dynamic of your offense.
Well, there's no question about it. Bryce has the rare talent of being able to do both, and very, very well. his ability to throw the football, see the field and throw the football anywhere he wants is pretty doggone rare. And maybe we've never seen it before. I don't think we have to this level of athleticism at the Michigan quarterback position. I can't remember a quarterback, and that's no disrespect to the All-Americans and champions that played that position at Michigan before, certainly, but he brings a different level.
Not to interrupt, but J.J. McCarthy might be the closest, and he just didn't have the build. He had the arm. He's an NFL top 10 quarterback and a starter, but he didn't have that build and the power and the strength in his running ability.
Yeah, it's just the size and exactly like you just said, the way that Bryce is built physically, the size of the skeleton and everything that goes with it. It's pretty incredible to see. So how does that relate to what the Michigan offense is? Well, you can clearly see against Central Michigan, totally different offensive approach. The handcuffs were off. The safety little box that they had Bryce in or tried to keep him in week 1. And then down there in Oklahoma, tried to keep him in this little box and just be the old Michigan football, which was successful in the last few years, running a totally different mental approach. We're just going to power you away. I don't think this team can do that, Balas. And I don't think we have the offensive line we did 2 years ago. Obviously, with that national championship team, I think that after the Oklahoma mess, this offensive staff maybe just looked around and said, okay, we got maybe the best talent at this quarterback position we've ever had here. Let's do what we've wanted to do and talked about doing, which is just let him do his thing. And that's what we saw. And it was against the Central Michigan front. Again, it's not very good. And I'm not trying to diminish what Bryce was able to do. It was an awesome day to watch. I just want to see it against better competition. And I would have loved to have gone back and seen it against Oklahoma, but we're never going to get a chance to do that.
We aren't, and I don't think that the offensive line would have been good enough in that game to accomplish much anyway, the way that they were struggling with the fundamentals and the techniques. But we are going to get another opportunity against a Nebraska defense in that environment, and environment definitely plays a part for a team that's still finding its confidence. Not for teams like yours back in the day that are like, okay, been there, done that. We're going to come out, we're going to kick your ass, get our chicken sandwich, and wave to your girlfriend on the way off the field, right? These guys are still trying to find their confidence, especially on the offensive line. Like I said, there was a shakeup there. But what did you see early in that game? You said there were a few pressures early on that I saw too, where Underwood had to escape, and they weren't exactly blowing guys off the ball. Was that a reason for the change of philosophy, do you think, up front?
Well, I think part of it for sure. I mean, again, back to the Oklahoma fundamental mess, just out of position, guys. And what I mean by fundamentals, and you mentioned it, your feet come together, or you're not getting out of your stance. You're bent way over at the waist. You got defensive linemen easily throwing you to the ground because you're out of balance. Your nose is way out over your toes, and you can't see things. Your hips are high. Your face is low. All the worst things you could turn film on and see an offensive lineman doing, whether he's acting alone in a one-on-one or whether he's working with a fellow lineman in a combo block trying to get to a linebacker. It was a hot mess against Oklahoma. Just looked like, my God, what happened here? And so the departure from that to more of a zone blocking scheme, for an offensive lineman, you still have to have your body posture and your balance and control. But it's just a different approach. It's a different mindset, zone blocking, technically wise, than it is when you're gap base blocking. And what Oklahoma did so well is they pinched and they jetted linebackers, which is difficult to deal with when you're running 46-47 power like we wanted to do. And so against Central Michigan, we're just zone blocking, which I can tell you, try to describe as a former offensive lineman. There's a comfort there in that you're not worried about which way that defensive lineman or linebacker may or may not slant. It doesn't matter. You're going to block whatever shows up. So if I'm in my stance and I'm playing right guard and it's a zone right, I've got the gap right between me and my offensive tackle, where all five of us are going to step in the same direction. And if the defensive lineman in front of me, the three technique, crosses my face, I got him. If that defensive lineman in front of me slants to my inside toward the center, the center is going to pick him up. And then my eyeballs are going to go to the next level because there's probably going to be a linebacker there because defenses have to have gap control and gap responsibilities. So you're going to have a color flash in front of you somewhere, somehow. And Michigan, quite honestly, for not doing it against Central, for not doing a lot of zone blocking in the last few years. 2 years ago, Corum did it. We did some wide stretch stuff, and Corum was pretty good at that, finding the slant or the seams. Michigan looked pretty good at it against Central Michigan. Again, it was an undermanned Central Michigan front, but we looked comfortable doing it from an offensive line point of view. So that was the good thing that I think showed up. And then, of course, what was going on in the backfield behind it all was very good. It wasn't perfect, though, Balas, and you mentioned the pressures. I think I marked off 4 or 5 pressures on the quarterback. And the way I define pressure, just so everybody understands, is anytime the quarterback feels like he needs to leave his preferred spot. And so if Bryce is back there and you watch the film and he's looking, and then all of a sudden he feels like he's got to bail out of there because the defensive line or linebackers are coming and collapsing some stuff, I consider that a pressure. And there were 4 or 5 of those in the game. Those aren't the biggest of deals when Bryce can do what he does, and that's part of the offense now. So, okay. What I really don't like at any time is when someone touches or hits the quarterback. Mm-hmm. And so we've still got a couple things to fix there. There was one snap. Evan Link got high over there at left tackle. He got bull rushed, and it was on the touchdown pass where Bryce had floated it perfectly up there. I think maybe it was to Samaj. I can't remember who caught the touchdown. Anyway, Evan Link was backed right up into Bryce's lap. That can't happen, right? Yep. It can't happen against Central Michigan. And so those things are still need to be fixed, and it's going to be a challenge for them to meet the standard in these tough games ahead.
Yeah, and Nebraska doesn't have a great defensive line, but it'll be interesting to see how they approach it. Maybe look at the Oklahoma game plan, which it's going to be a little different, obviously, what Michigan is going to run. I was going to ask you, what's Max Bredesen's role when it comes to zone blocking then? If he's not going to be that lead blocker, what is his role out there?
He can do the same. It's kind of the same thing. When Michigan was heavier zone blocking, Balas, remember the film breakdowns? We used to call guys the plumber.
Yes.
Because you know what a plumber does. Yeah. He just fixes shit. And so if you're zone left and you got your offensive linemen all taking a space, Bredesen can still be a very effective blocker out there. He just blocks the first opposite color that leaks. He's the first thing that shows up. That's what Bredesen takes care of. And so if it's intentional lead side blocking, that's still going to be his role, just in a different assignment, if you will. And of course, he's obviously going to be the counter guy too, because he can catch the football and he can do some other things. But he's still an attention mark that a defensive coordinator has to key on and to try to set some things with his linebackers out there. So it's still critical for him, and he'll still play the most important role for him is what he did so well the last couple of years. It's going to be a different technique. That's all.
Yeah. Yep. You got to have him out there. He's that guy, right? When the running game where you're like, okay, this is the guy that's really going to make this thing go. No matter what.
And let's try not to paint this picture like Michigan has abandoned its power identity. No, because you saw in short yardage and goal line, Bredesen's still leading up in there. So we're still a straight ahead when it gets down in there. So we're going to still do that. You're just going to see far more of the wide stuff here in the coming weeks because of what we saw.
Yeah, about 10 more minutes here with Doug Skene, Michigan's 5-time Big Ten champion. What is it? 4 times I have to say that it's in your contract for you to.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, all right. We'll talk to your agent about that. So anyway, also played in the NFL for Bill Parcells. Anyway, so I wanted to talk about something that Biff Poggi, Michigan's interim coach, told us after the game that I thought was very interesting and probably long overdue. Is that Sharon Moore? He said his entire time in individuals this week was spent with the offensive line. And there were 2 things I thought about that. Okay. Number one, maybe he should have done this earlier, right? You don't want to undermine your coaches. But number 2, it's a kind of an indictment, and people are going to point fingers and be mad at me for saying this, but on your position coach. And I wrote yesterday, I said, well, if your supervisor or if your boss, the head guy at your company, comes down and spends a week in your department doing your job, then you're probably thinking to yourself, man, am I doing a good enough job? And I don't want to sit there and rip on Grant Newsome, who I love, who's a great guy, who's a great Wolverine. But to me, that group has not been living up to its potential. This is not the most talented line that Michigan's ever had. Let's be honest, and let's be clear about that. Could it have been better last year? Could it have been better this year? Absolutely, in my opinion. And when Sharon Moore said after game 2, he said, it's not the what, it's the how. I thought that was kind of an indictment. And so he gets on there and gets hands on. He had 2 new guards in there, and fair to say they looked better. Again, hard to tell how much against a weak opponent, but to me, that was kind of telling, was it not?
Yeah, it is. And your analogy of a boss or a supervisor coming into your office or coming into your workplace and showing you or taking things over, taking the pen out of your hand and doing whatever needs to be done. It's hard to say, right? I mean, I could always sit here and say, well, if my boss came to town and sat in my chair and did my work for me, I would wonder what is going on. And obviously, but there's a coaching. So the greatest of head coaches coach their assistant coaches as hard or harder as they coach their players. And I witnessed that during my time at Michigan. I've watched it over the years at the college level. You can see it visibly on Saturdays, depending on which team you watched. I don't think there's any more glaring example than Nick Saban over his years. Like him or hate him, doesn't matter. It's not my point. When you watch Nick Saban coach long enough, he lit into his assistant coaches as much as he did his players and holding them accountable. And I'm not saying every coach has to have that style and that kind of public persona getting into his coaches, but at some point, you have to have performance out of each positional group. And the offensive line last year was nowhere near close enough, Balas. You said it. We'll say it again. That's a fact. 62, 64% of the time, our quarterbacks were under pressure or getting hit last year. So totally unacceptable. And then after the mess of just fundamental techniques that we saw down there at Oklahoma, it doesn't surprise me that Sharon had enough. He'd seen enough. Went over there with Newsome and spent the week working with the offensive line. It's what Sharon did really, really, really well when he was the O-line coach. And to a degree, yes, against Central, it was better. The question still remains, why does the head coach have to go coach up his offensive line? Because they're not doing well enough. So whatever had to happen, great. It's too bad that Sharon had to go over there and light a fire under their ass this week, I guess. But I guess things got bad enough.
Yeah.
And so this is not about any one person. It's about the standard of expectation for the offensive line at Michigan. And if you look at some of the techniques that you broke down on the website, you showed some clips there. We got guys laying on the ground. Yeah. We got really bad feet. We got people out of position, pulling guards that are drifting way out, linebackers running underneath. This is the kind of stuff that gets implemented and coached and fixed in spring football. Yeah. Back in March, you learn how to properly pull around and turn your shoulders and find front side linebackers. It was horrible against Oklahoma. So it doesn't surprise me that Sharon stepped in. I don't know what this means for the long term for Grant Newsome. But if I'm the offensive line coach and I just had that happen to me, I might be changing the way I coach. Yeah. I might be, reevaluating how I'm coaching my guys. And I think that's natural for any leader that's overseeing people. I would feel the same way in the job I have now. And you got to take the coaching as a coach as much as you do a player.
Fair to say you never saw Bo Schembechler go to do that with Jerry Hanlon's line or Gary Moeller with Les Miles?
I'll tell you, in the time that I was there with Coach Hanlon and Coach Miles, I will tell you that in practice and in film sessions, many times we heard either Gary Moeller or Coach Schembechler absolutely raise his voice and get on to Jerry and Les about things he did not like. That were happening on the offensive line. And that was in a team setting. The offense is watching film and Bo is sitting up front or Coach Moeller is sitting up front. and they would say something to the offensive line coach, and it was not complimentary. So you talk about, again, coaches coaching their coaches. Both of those guys did that. And then we would get into our offensive line meeting room where it was just us. And Jerry used to joke about it, but he was kind of serious and less of the same way. They would say, you guys, and now they're getting on us as players, you guys are going to get me fired, right? You can't be this bad because I want to keep coaching here, right? And
right.
Yes, Jerry Hamlin was never going to get fired, but the experience was, hey, the standard is for everybody, and you don't get a free pass no matter who you are. So you have to keep pace.
Jerry would tell you that he got fired every week, but after they got out of the bathroom when they were yelling at each other, I'm going to take a Stembeckler now, then he would be hired back. So again, Doug Skene here with us, Michigan's 5-time Big Ten champion. Doug, I wanted to ask you about Jake Guarnera starting for Brady Norton. We heard midweek and hinted to it in our Inside the Fort column on Friday that suffered an injury in practice, replaced by a redshirt freshman who I thought did a pretty good job, all things considered, for a young guy. What did you see from him?
Yeah, I thought he was pretty good. Again, I wasn't going to get too excited about anything going on up front against that Central Michigan front, against that defensive line and linebackers. As I watched the game, again, as I told you earlier, I thought this is a mismatch. Just talent-wise, football talent-wise. So we're going to be able to do what we want to do, and we did. So as far as young Guarnera goes, did a fine job, looked the role, played the part, moved around in there well. I was watching his body language, communicating with his guys, had a smile on his face a couple times in there with him and Crippen in the center, which is a good indicator they're having fun, and they should have. They were winning easily and having a lot of success and getting in the end zone a lot and having fun. So I think a good first start. Not going to get too excited about any of it, and we'll see how it happens going forward.
100%. Starting next week at Nebraska. And again, not being critical. You did what you needed to do, but what you can really tell about an offensive line is how they're doing against better athletes and if they're getting push. We saw what happened to Greg Crippen against Oklahoma. I ran into John Jansen on the way down the field. I said, "What'd you think?" And he said pretty much the same thing. And he said, pulling still got issues, angles and things like that. And he said, but better than last week, but it better be when you have guys up front that you're, 70 pounds bigger than, and that just aren't really to your skill level. So it'll be fascinating to see what happens. So defense did fine, really better than fine. There's times in the zones where the safeties and the linebackers are still confused about where to be. That needs to be cleaned up, or Nebraska will exploit that. Jay-Sean Barham, man, that kid is an absolute physical freak. That guy stands out on film. I compared him to, again, and I'll do this until I die, Jefferson from Fast Times at Ridgemont High after they destroyed his car.
My dad got a sweet set of tools, man.
See, they're going to be a few handfuls of guys. We're going to be doing this when we're 70, and they're going to be a handful of guys that chuckle at that. But right now, appreciate it, guys. While you still
so Jay-Sean Barham is right now he's a defensive player of the year early in the season here for Michigan. This guy's a terror out there. He just has a jitteriness when he's out there, Balas. You could just
like tell. Jefferson.
He is. You're right. It's a funny comparison. There's a lot of truth to it. The dude's a lot of fun to watch, and he plays with recklessness, man. He's just trying to kill people all the time. And boy, as a coach, man, you wish all your players were like that, where you got to hold them back, just get them to slow down. I've never seen Jay-Sean practice, but I guarantee you that he's the guy in practice. Like, it might be Thursday. I'm gonna try to kind of get through this practice here without too many major bumps. When that dude's lined up across from you better tighten up your chin strap because this guy's bringing it. Reminds me a lot of Aiden Hutchinson, one speed only. And so, but he's an outstanding player. He's the leader on that defense. And so, I look forward to seeing how he develops.
Quiet guy. We've never even heard from him yet in an interview, which is crazy. So, and unlike Jefferson, they don't just fly him in for football games. Anyway, special teams got to improve, man. I don't know what they're doing back on punt return, but that's going to be tired. It scares the shit out of me.
Catch the football.
Right.
Catch the football. Listen, against Central. Okay, yeah, ugly, didn't kill us. That's got to be fixed. I mean, I mean, receiving. I don't know what they got to do back there, man. You got to catch the football. That's crazy.
Yes.
We can't seem to be in position. We don't know how to judge the accuracy or where we should be lined up in depth. So that's got to be fixed. And I've had enough of our All-American kicker missing kicks.
Yeah.
That's got to be fixed too. I mean,
And
come on.
I mean, he's hitting it well. He's just missing a little bit here and there. So I'm sure he's the least of my issues. And I wrote that. I get it. It's one.
Yeah, I know.
I know what you think of kickers and punters. We hear you talk about Chris Stapleton all the time, how he wasn't really a member of that team. You know, didn't you say that to me one time?
Yeah, that's sure. That's what I said.
Stapes, I'm sorry about that. You know. Anyway, great stuff, Skene. I appreciate it. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to talk about here before we leave. I can't.
No, well, there's one thing I want to mention.
Yeah.
Just that there was a parallel. And of course, I watch a lot of college football and wasn't feeling really well this weekend, so I watched even more college football. But I watched the Georgia at Tennessee game, and if you watched any of that, I was texting with some of my high school buddies, and I just had mentioned that game to me, for the Georgia Bulldogs, demonstrated what I call calloused, right? And I told my buddies, I said, Georgia is a calloused football program. They don't hesitate in that environment. They don't pause. They don't get scared. They don't tremble. They just perform. And I had said, Georgia's going to win this football game. And they did it, by the skin of their teeth, but they never really faltered. And I was just kind of thinking to myself, Michigan has to reestablish its dominance on the road in tough environments. What happened at Oklahoma was a hot mess. We got a big one coming up at Nebraska. Reestablishing callous and toughness on the road is an incredibly important detail to have if you want to have a successful season. This Michigan team is no exception. They're going to have to find a way to have that calm killer attitude when they go into somebody else's stadium, and it starts this Saturday.
Yeah, got to win one of these two, in my opinion, against Nebraska, USC. I ruffled some Nebraska feathers by saying Michigan's more talented than every other team on the schedule, with the exception maybe of Ohio State, maybe USC in some areas, but they've got better athletes. I mean, the recruiting rankings kind of bear that out. And if you watch them on film, I think that's clear to say too. No disrespect to Nebraska. I think love their fans, and I really respect their program, even if their coach is a little bit of a bitch. So, well, he was crying about the signs. He said the reason that they lost in 2023 was because Michigan had their signs, and I'm going to have to disagree with that. Maybe bitch was a little strong, but come on, man, you got your ass kicked. So it had nothing to do with the signs. But regardless, it's a great atmosphere, great environment. Really love their fan base and respect that program. So love going down there. Sean Callahan and the guys do a great job at our Huskers on 3 site. So looking forward to getting down there and seeing what's going on. It's like Oklahoma. Those people are just so friendly. So anyway, Skene, I appreciate your time, man. And we will do this again next week. Hopefully we're not complaining. Hopefully we get some really good, fundamentally strong, sound offensive line play, and that's what we're talking about. But he's Doug Skene. Doug, I appreciate your time, and we will do this again next week.
Go Blue.